Hello guys, and welcome to my video lecture. This is a revision lecture, okay, and I'm going to revise the chapter Molecular Basis of Inheritance from the 12th standard biology CBSE textbook. So there will be 2 or 3 lectures of this revision series, okay, and so the pace of this lecture is going to be slightly more. It's not a regular lecture. If you people want the regular lectures on those topics, please let me know. I'll make separate videos for them. Okay, so let us start with our today's lecture. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to start with the first part of the chapter, which deals with experiments based on DNA as the genetic material. Okay, so there were 3 experiments which were conducted, so let us get down to the detail. The first experiment which was used was Griffith's experiment, correct? And what is important in this is the 4 steps of the experiment. Okay, so the first step of the experiment, if you directly write down, so first step, mice are injected with any one of the strains you can write. So I will write down live R strain. Okay, and what happened to the mice, since it is R strain? So for all those who have not kind of read this from the book, so Griffith used a bacterium called as Streptococcus pneumoniae, okay, a bacterium which causes pneumonia, and that bacterium has 2 strains, smooth strain and rough strain, right? S is the smooth one, R is the rough one. And what is the difference? S strain is pathogenic, R strain is non-pathogenic. So all this we have already studied. Okay, so the first step was when mice were injected with live R strain, what happened? All of them obviously survived. Okay, so no deaths. First step. Second step, mice injected with live S strain, correct? And what happened to them? Since S strain is virulent, it killed all the mice. Okay, so all the mice are dead, correct, because it caused pneumonia in them. Third step is, now this is very important, third was mice injected with heat killed S strain. Okay, so very important point to remember, heat killed S strain. What happened is, see, since the bacteria were heat killed, none of them could cause the disease because heat kind of denatures the toxic proteins of the bacteria. It basically kills the bacteria, correct? So because of that, no deaths, so all the mice were alive. And what is the last step of that experiment? Last step is mice injected with a mixture of heat killed S strain plus live R strain, correct? And what happened is all the mice died. Okay, so everybody knows the reason why all of them died. The principle is called as transformation, so I'm going to write down that word over here. Very important to know that principle. And what is the meaning of transformation? Transformation is basically a phenomena in which one bacterium takes up the DNA of foreign bacterium, and because of that principle is called as transformation, correct? So in this case, what happened was the live R strain took up the DNA of heat killed S strain. So heat killed S strain is a killed bacterium, but its DNA is still there. Okay, so the DNA has separated because of the heat. And what happens is, the live R strain, when it is mixed with the heat killed S strain, that live R strain takes up the DNA of the S strain, and because of that it gets converted. Okay, so that S strain DNA takes over the DNA of R strain, and now that entire R strain bacterium is going to behave like S strain. Is that clear? And that is why the R strain become pathogenic. Another difference is between the R strain and the S strain is that the S strain has a capsule protein envelope, because of which it is pathogenic, whereas the R strain doesn't have a protein envelope. So when this transformation occurs, the R strain develops a protein coat around itself and it becomes pathogenic. Okay, so I hope this experiment is clear. Griffith's experiment was the first experiment to show the process of transformation. Is this clear? Okay, now let us move to the second experiment. The second experiment was an extension of Griffith's experiment, and it was carried out by three people. Okay, Avery, MacLeod and McCarty, these three. Okay, what they did was they basically did a confirmation test that DNA is the hereditary material or the transforming principle. So if anybody remembers this experiment, what Avery, MacLeod and McCarty did was they took 4 or 5 test tubes. Okay, so let me just draw them over here. Okay, so they took 4 tubes, let us assume 4. Okay, 4 test tubes, and in all the test tubes they added a culture of live R strain bacteria, okay, which I'm going to show with green color. So this is the live R strain bacteria which is added in all the tubes. Okay, so I'm just going to label it live R strain. Now, what did they want to prove? They wanted to prove that DNA was the transforming principle, or DNA is responsible for transformation. So what they did was they heat killed the S strain, okay, and they separated all the components of the S strain bacteria. For example, they separated the lipids, they separated the carbohydrates, proteins, DNA, everything. So that is very, very important to remember that in this experiment, S strain bacterium was heat killed and all the components of its cell were separated. Okay, so all the components are separated, and what these three did was they added each of these components in each of the tubes. Is this correct? Okay, so first of all, say for example in first test tube they added carbohydrates. Okay, so I'm going to write down carbohydrates plus. Now these carbohydrates are obviously from the S strain. Please remember, now whatever I'm going to add, that is going to come from the S strain. What happened when carbohydrates were mixed with the heat with the living R strain? Did anything happen? Obviously nothing happened, because transformation doesn't occur because of carbs. So what they observed was R strain did not transform into S strain. Correct? Suppose in the second tube they added lipids of the S strain which was heat killed. Again, did they observe any transformation? No, there was no transformation. Correct? Third step was, let us assume they added proteins. Was there any transformation? No, there was no transformation. So in all these tubes, the R strain which was added initially remained as R strain. It did not change into S strain, because if transformation occurs, then R strain will change into S strain. Now in the last tube, what did they add? They added DNA from the S strain. Okay, now what will happen when these DNA from the S strain is added into live R strain? That live R strain bacteria will take up the DNA of the S strain, that is called as transformation, and because of that what will happen is that S strain DNA will convert the R strain into S strain, and that is why in this last tube transformation occurred. Correct? And this live R strain got converted into S strain. So I hope you remember the steps. This was the experiment. Okay, very, very simple experiment. Now they also did a confirmatory test to make sure that DNA is only responsible for transformation. What did they do? They made another tube. So I'm going to draw the tube over here. Okay, so they made another tube. To this tube they added the live R strain as earlier, and to this they also added the enzyme DNase. Please remember this. Okay, so this mixture is live R strain plus DNase. What is DNase? DNase is a type of nuclease which cuts the DNA. Okay, but please remember the DNase which was added here would only cut the DNA of S strain, not the R strain. Okay, I hope you understand this. So it is not going to affect the DNA of the R strain, it is only going to affect the DNA of the S strain. And to this, what did they add? Again, your original thing, they added the DNA from the S strain. So the mixture is R strain bacterium plus DNase, and to that mixture they add DNA from the S strain. What happens is, DNase, as soon as that S strain DNA goes into the mixture, the DNase cuts that DNA off, and because of that there is no transformation. So in this last tube there is no transformation, and because of that it is proved that DNA is responsible for transformation. If the DNA gets cut or destroyed, there is no transformation. Or this experiment also proves that DNA is the genetic material in bacteria. Is this clear? Okay, so these are the first two experiments. The next experiment was the experiment which was done by Hershey and Chase. Okay, and this experiment was done to prove that even in the bacteriophage, DNA is the genetic material. Okay, so we'll start with that. Now please remember, out of these three experiments, I'm going to rub all of this. Griffith's experiment and Hershey-Chase experiments are very important from your exam point of view, so those are mostly asked. Avery MacLeod-McCarthy experiment is not asked much. So let us come to the third experiment, which is also called as Hershey and Chase experiment. Okay, first of all, this experiment was done on bacteriophage. Okay, now what is a bacteriophage? We have already studied this. Okay, so bacteriophage is a virus which infects bacteria. Correct? Okay, the structure of the bacteriophage, okay, I have shown in one of my earlier videos. So the structure is somewhat like this. This is the protein. Okay, this entire green portion is the protein, and inside the protein is present the genetic material. Okay, this is the virus which infects the bacteria. It is called as bacteriophage. There are many different kinds of bacteriophages. Now, what was the experiment? So they took two different samples of bacteriophage, okay, and they grew them in two different mediums. Please remember this. Which were the media which were used? So I will write down over here medium number 1 which was there. Okay, growth medium, I mean the medium in which they grew the bacteriophage or cultured the bacteriophage. So growth medium number 1 was made up of phosphorus 32. Okay, so this is a slightly different isotope of phosphorus. Okay, and growth medium 1 was phosphorus 32. Growth medium, the next growth medium which was used, so growth medium number 2 was sulfur 35. Okay, so these are the two isotopes which were used. One medium has phosphorus 32, the other had sulfur 35. Okay, now before we proceed with the experiment, it is very important to remember that this DNA which is there, this DNA is basically made up of nucleotides, right? And each nucleotide is made up of three components: sugar, nitrogen base, and phosphate group. So basically your DNA has got a lot of phosphorus. Okay, so please remember that phosphorus is present in the DNA, whereas if you see over here the sulfur, normally sulfur is mostly present in proteins. So this entire green structure, that has a lot of sulfur. Okay, so I'm just pointing this out. So please remember this: DNA has got phosphorus, proteins have got sulfur. So what did they do? They grew these two sets of bacteriophages in two different mediums. Okay, and what happened was, so let us just scroll this sideways. What happened was that the bacteriophage which was grown in P32, okay, So this bacteriophage had DNA labeled with P32. So what do I mean by labeling? So the bacteriophage which was grown in this P32 medium, so when it was growing, it took that P32 inside its body, and that P32 got deposited in the DNA. So that is why I am writing DNA labeled. Labeled means it got mixed. Whereas the bacteriophage which was grown in S35, so the sulfur was absorbed into the entire protein covering. So I will write down protein labeled with P35. Okay, are you getting me? If you want, I can draw the two structures over here so that it is easier to understand. So again, I'm going to draw the basic structure. So this is growth medium 1, the first bacteriophage. Okay, and the DNA. Okay, I'm writing down number 1. Now this DNA is labeled with P32 because it was grown in growth medium 1. Now I draw the second diagram over here, and the DNA. But what happens is the second bacteriophage was grown in S35 medium. So S35 doesn't go into the DNA. DNA doesn't have sulfur. So what is going to happen is I'm going to label this as S35. Is this clear? So both the bacteriophages were labeled. One had the DNA labeled, the other had protein labeled. Is this clear? Then what happened next? So since we are having shortage of space, let me rub this off. Okay, now what they did was they allowed both the bacteriophages to infect the bacterium. Okay, so what will happen is now I'm just going to write down, I'm not going to draw them again. So bacteriophage 1, correct, bracket mein I will write down labeled with P32, and over here I will write down bacteriophage 2 labeled with S35. They are allowed to infect E. coli. What is E. coli? E. coli is a bacterium. So one E. coli over here, another E. coli over here, correct? Let this be the nucleoid of the bacterium. So why am I not using the term nucleus? Because bacteria don't have nucleus. They have a very rudimentary type of nucleus called as nucleoid, which is nothing but folded DNA. It is also called as bacterial chromosome. Okay, so this is the DNA. Now what happens is when these bacteriophages infect bacteria, so when they infected this respective E. coli, the first one, you know how bacteriophage work. So bacteriophage basically inject the DNA. In my yesterday's video, I have taught you how viruses inject their genetic material inside the host. So in a similar way, bacteriophage, when it sits down, so I will do one thing, let me draw this. I thought I will save time by not drawing, but I think maybe it will be better if I draw. So if this is the bacteriophage, okay, and this is the DNA, then what happens is this bacteriophage injects this DNA inside the bacterium. Okay, so what happens is this bacteriophage becomes empty. What do I mean by empty? So empty means that it doesn't have any genetic material left in it, so this is called as a ghost, correct? So now what is going to happen is in this E. coli, this viral DNA will go and mix with this DNA, correct? So I'm going to rub this off. Okay, and now what is going to happen is this DNA which is present, this DNA also has P32 because it was mixed with the viral DNA. Now let us take the example of the second bacteriophage over here. So again I am going to draw the bacteriophage, correct? It has got the DNA over here. Okay, it will also inject the DNA, and that DNA will get mixed over here with the DNA of the bacterium. Okay, so let me rub this off, and again this will be a ghost, correct? But will this DNA have S35? No, this DNA will not have S35 because sulfur is present on the ghost. And during this experiment, what they do is after the DNA is injected by the respective bacteriophage, they centrifuge both the samples, and because of centrifugation what will happen is the bacteriophage will be removed by the centrifugal force. Okay, so I'm going to rub off the bacteriophage in both the examples because they have been removed by centrifugation, because their job is done now. Correct. So over here, if you see in the first E. coli, if you do the testing of that E. coli, you will find that it has got P32. Whereas if you do the testing of the second E. coli, you will not find S35, because S35 was present on that ghost and it was removed during centrifugation. So what does this experiment prove? It proves that even the bacteriophage is transmitting DNA only. So DNA is the genetic material in bacteriophage, not the proteins. Okay, so I hope this experiment is clear. So in this first 20 minutes we have basically revised all the three experiments, and I would like to make a note over here. If you are studying this for the first time, you are not going to understand any of this. You need to read this first. Okay, this is a revision lecture, and if you want the actual lectures on this topic, please let me know and I will surely make them. Is this clear? Okay. Okay, now the next topic that I'm going to take for revision from this chapter is going to be DNA replication. Okay, before that there is a part on packaging of DNA in prokaryotes, eukaryotes. I don't think that needs revision. It is very theoretical. Again, if you people need the video on that, let me know. Okay, I'll send you the link for that video. uh, so next is going to be DNA replication, which is a very important part, and it has got many enzymes, and people tend to confuse the functions of the enzymes. Okay, so DNA replication, correct. Now let us start with it. So I have a double stranded DNA over here, correct. I will label the ends 5 prime, 3 prime, 3 prime, 5 prime. Now what is DNA replication? DNA replication is a process in which one DNA produces two daughter DNA molecules, correct. When does this happen? So for all of you who have studied cell division, this occurs in the S phase of the cell cycle, the synthesis phase, which is present after the first growth phase or the G1 phase, correct. So what is the first step? How does the replication occur? So the point where replication begins is called as the point O. Okay, so over here I am going to just mark this point as O point. So O is also called as origin, because that is where it is going to start replicating. Okay, and the first step that is going to happen is, so I think most of you know that the bonds between these two strands are hydrogen bonds, correct. A double bond between A and T, a triple bond between G and C. So first thing that is going to happen is this strand, this one on which I have shown this O, that is going to be nicked, it is going to be cut by an enzyme called as endonuclease. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just rub a small part, okay, and that is the cut produced by the enzyme endonuclease. So let me just write down over here. I'll highlight all the enzymes with yellow color. So endonuclease is the enzyme which produces the cut over here. So the first step is cut produced by endonuclease in one of the strands, at which point? At O point, correct, and that is called as the origin point. Now what is the next step? As soon as endonuclease produces the cut in this area, what happens is the enzyme called as helicase, okay, that helicase enzyme goes inside. Okay, are you getting my point? So the helicase enzyme basically goes inside through this cut, and it will now begin to break the hydrogen bonds which are present between the two strands. So I am going to show the hydrogen bonds. All these are the hydrogen bonds, correct. And what is going to happen is the helicase enzyme, so I'm going to write it down later on. What it will do is it will break the bonds which are present over here, hydrogen bonds, okay. And after breaking the hydrogen bonds, it is going to uncoil the DNA. Now this is a very simple diagram, but normally if you see, the DNA is kind of coiled around itself. Okay, it's like this. And also the bonds, hydrogen bonds are present between the two strands. So what the helicase enzyme does is, first of all, it breaks these bonds which are present, okay, because you need to uncoil the DNA, you need to unwrap the DNA, and after it breaks these hydrogen bonds, it opens up these coils so that this becomes like this. Are you getting me? So over here I am not showing that helical nature. Please remember the DNA is helical like this, but the next enzyme is going to be DNA helicase, and helicase is going to first break the bonds. So origin is over here. All this area which is present above the origin, nothing is going to happen over there. They are still going to be bonded, okay, and they are still in the helical state. So okay, to avoid confusion, let me just draw it the way it should be. Okay, so this is the coiled DNA, correct, and this is the DNA which has opened up. Okay, now if you want to do the labelings which we had done earlier, this region is the origin, okay, which was the first enzyme which caused the nick in one of the strands. The name of the enzyme was endonuclease. So endonuclease cut the DNA in one of the strands. Why did it cut? Because helicase can enter through that cut inside the DNA. Once the helicase enters, again that gap is sealed. Okay, so if I'm trying to show you that over here this cut is produced by endonuclease, once the enzyme DNA helicase goes inside, this cut is again repaired. I hope you are understanding. Okay, that cut is just for helicase to enter. And what helicase does is, helicase breaks the hydrogen bonds below the origin and it unwinds the two strands. So you have got this. So over here I am going to write down, this is caused by helicase. Okay, name of the enzyme is DNA helicase. Okay, let me rub this off. Now first of all, let us label the polarities of the strand. Okay, this first strand is 5 prime to 3 prime, and this next strand is 3 prime to 5 prime. They are anti-parallel, having opposite polarities. Okay, now what is the next step? Now what is going to happen is, both these strands which are present, they are having complementary bases, so they will go and again stick to each other. And to prevent that from happening, the proteins which are used are called as single strand binding proteins. Okay, so I'm just going to use this blue color over here, and I'm going to show these proteins on the two strands. And what are these proteins called as? They are called as SSBP, single strand binding proteins. What do? They bind to the complementary bases so that these two strands do not stick with each other, correct? Next step, what happens after the SSBP are there? Next step, so I'm going to rub this off. It is understood that the SSBP are present over there. I'm just going to rub them off so that they don't distract you unnecessarily. Okay, and let us just draw the complete strand now, or I'll just rub this off and I'll again draw this strand. Okay, so this is one strand, this is your other strand, this is 3 prime, this is 5 prime. So SSBP are attached, they'll prevent the strands from re-annealing. Re-annealing means rejoining. Now what is the next step? The next step is, there is something called as a RNA primer. Okay, you want to start the growth of the daughter strand. One daughter strand will grow over here, the other will grow on this strand. Okay, so for the growth to begin, you need a sequence, a very small sequence, which is called as RNA primer. Okay, and over here I'm going to use the yellow color because you need to remember single strand binding proteins, and that is SSBP. Are you getting my point? So SSBP will be bound over here. After that, what is going to happen is, once the RNA primers are ready, the SSBP will be removed, because if the SSBP is bound to the strands, the RNA primer will not be able to bind. So as soon as the RNA primers are ready, what is a primer? A primer is basically a very small sequence which is complementary to the DNA strand. Okay, and the RNA primer is always connected to the 3' end of the parent strand. So now these are the two parent strands. Please remember, a parent strand is also called as a template. Template is a strand on which a new daughter DNA will be formed. Okay, so there are two templates, two strands over here. Now on the 3' end of the template, the RNA primer will be bound. So I'm going to draw the RNA primer with a green color over here. So one primer will be attached over here, and this strand has 3' end which is open over here. So I'm going to attach a primer over here. So I hope you understand. And this is the 5' end of the primer, this is the 5' end of the primer. So please remember, many people make a mistake over here. Where does the primer attach? The primer attaches to the 3' end of the parent strand, or you can say the primer forms the 5' end of the new strand that is going to be formed. But forget the confusion, just remember it is attached to the 3' end of the template or the parent strand. Correct? Once the primers have been attached, now what is going to happen is, now you need to add nucleotides on both the strands. Okay, correct? So the nucleotides will be added by which enzyme? The enzyme which will add the nucleotides, these enzyme is called as DNA polymerase. Okay, so the next enzyme is going to be your DNA polymerase enzyme. So I'm going to write the enzyme over here. There is a step called as activation of nucleotides. I'll explain that later. Okay, so this DNA polymerase, what it is going to do is, now everything is happening inside the nucleus. Correct? So from the nucleus, all the nucleotides. Okay, so the nucleotides are what? Basically the nucleotides are adenine nucleotide, thymine, guanine, cytosine. Okay, and if you remember the shape of a nucleotide. Okay, so let me go down, because this is a completely new topic. So please remember that I have added the primers over here on the 3' end of the parent. Now let us come to the nucleotides. So what is a nucleotide? If you remember, the basic structure of a nucleotide is like this. This is the pentose sugar, this is the oxygen attached here. To the first carbon will be attached the nitrogen base. Okay, so nitrogen base may be A or T or G or C. Okay, this is the second, third, fourth. This is the 5th carbon, and to the 5th carbon is attached the phosphate group. This is your nucleotide. Correct? Now these nucleotides, all of them have one phosphate, so these are also written as DNMP. D stands for deoxyribose, because these are the nucleotides of DNA. N stands for nucleotide, so you can replace N by ATGC. So for example, if you want to write down the adenine nucleotide, it will be DAMP. Adenine mononucleotide, adenine monophosphate, single phosphate, so MP. Similarly, if I replace A by T, it will be DTMP, then DGMP, and then DCMP. So these are the 4 nucleotides which are present. But however, if you remember the lecture, if you want these nucleotides for DNA formation, daughter DNA formation, you require them to be in the triphosphate form. This is monophosphate, but I need this form where 3 phosphate molecules are attached. So these nucleotides, monophosphates, you need to convert into triphosphate. So this is adenine triphosphate, this is thymine triphosphate, this is guanine triphosphate, and this is cytosine triphosphate. How will you add these 2 phosphates? Very simple. You use ATP. Okay, adenosine triphosphate you use, and the ATP splits, into AMP, and the two phosphates which are released, they are added to each of this, and you get this. So this step in your book is given as activation of nucleotide. So this is given before replication process. I am teaching it to you now. Anyway, this is very simple. So all these four which I have drawn, okay, these are your ready-made nucleotides, okay, and these nucleotides are going to be used by which enzyme? DNA polymerase. DNA polymerase is going to use this triphosphates of adenine, thymine, guanine and cytosine. Is this part clear? Okay, so now let us go back to the replication part. Okay, going up. So now we have this diagram over here, correct? So all those nucleotides in the triphosphate forms are ready. Now DNA polymerase takes those nucleotides and attaches them over here one after the other. Okay, so I'm going to form which color should I use for complementary DNA? Okay, let me use a different color. Let me use this pink color. So this new DNA will be formed, daughter DNA, in this direction. Okay, and this will have all the nucleotides which are complementary. Now you know the meaning of complementary. If there is A on the template, the complementary will be T. Okay, if there is G on the template, complementary will be C. So one strand will be formed like this going upwards. Okay, what is going to happen over here is, see, please remember, DNA polymerase always creates a new strand only in one direction, and DNA polymerase always works in the direction of 5' to 3'. I think I have stressed this enough number of times that the growth of DNA or the reading of DNA is always from 5 to 3. So here it will go upwards, here it is going to go downwards. So the new strand which will be formed, it will go downwards like this. Okay, and this will be the 3' end of this strand, and this will be the 3' end of this strand. Is this clear? Is this clear? So up till now we have seen endonuclease, single strand binding protein, DNA helicase, RNA primer, DNA polymerase. Okay, is this clear? Now what is happening is, when this part is done, this helicase which is present, it will open up this DNA further, because see, this part is done, this needs to grow upwards, but these strands are still bounded over here, and similarly this is already grown. Now what will happen? So DNA helicase will open this upper part which is present, so this part which is now coiled, the hydrogen bonds will be broken and they will be opened up by helicase. So further opening up will take place. So let us go down, let us again draw the diagram. Okay, so now further uncoiling will take place, and now the DNA will be opened even more. Correct? Please check the diagram. Here the DNA is uncoiled to some extent, here it has uncoiled even more. Okay, again the same thing, 5', 3', 3', 5'. So what is going to happen is, already you had added the primer over here, so I'm going to show the primer, and that primer had created a new strand, so I will show that strand, and it was up till here. Now this area has been opened up, so the DNA polymerase will continue to grow this strand upwards. Correct? So this is obviously, this end is the 5' end and this end is the 3' end. Correct? And over here if you see, the primer was initially placed over here, and the strand which was grown was over here, and this was the 3' end and this was the 5' end. But after opening up, this space has been created, and what is going to happen is, now again the growth is going to be downwards, but there is no primer over here. Please remember, a primer is required for polymerase to grow the strand, so another primer will be attached over here. So you see what is happening in this strand, there are two primers used. Here the growth is continuous, here it is discontinuous, and again polymerase will take that primer and it will grow the strand downwards. Okay, again this will be the 5', this will be the 3'. Are you getting me? So what is happening is, eventually this part will also open up, this strand which is present on the left hand side in purple, it is going to grow continuously upwards, whereas this strand on the right hand side in purple, it is going to grow discontinuously. Discontinuously means it is going to grow like this, whereas the strand on the left side is going to grow continuously like this. Are you getting me? And are you understanding why? Because over here the primer is in the perfect direction, so every time the DNA opens up, this is going to grow upwards continuously. So this strand which is growing continuously is called as the leading strand, please remember. Whereas this strand which is growing discontinuously, it is called as the lagging strand. I hope this is clear. Okay. Similarly, the template or the parent strands are also called as leading template, and this is also called as the lagging template. Is this part clear? Okay. And soon what is going to happen is, soon this DNA will also be, the hydrogen bonds will be broken by helicase, they will be unwound by the helicase, so the entire DNA will be unwound. And so I can draw the final diagram like this if you want. Okay, so this is one strand which is completely unwound, this is the other strand which is completely unwound, this is the primer over here, or let me just name the strands. This is 5, this is 3, this is 3, this is 5. Okay, this is the leading template and this is the lagging template, correct? Okay, now this is going to produce one continuous daughter DNA in this direction, and the polarity will be 3' to 5'. This is which strand? This is the leading strand. And what is going to happen over here? Over here basically many primers will be present. Okay, and the strand will be produced, the daughter DNA will be produced discontinuously, and that is also called as the lagging strand. Okay, so this is going to be the 5' end of that, this is going to be the 3'. Now these fragments which are produced, they are also called as Okazaki fragments. So please remember that. What are Okazaki fragments? Okazaki fragments are the pieces of the lagging strand which are produced one after the other, and there is a small gap in between them. So what is the next step? The next step is going to be that all these strands, the gap which is present, that gap is attached by an enzyme called as DNA ligase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join these areas, and that is done by an enzyme which is called as DNA ligase. So ligase is like the gum. In molecular biology, DNA ligase joins everything. Is this clear? After joining, next thing is, now you need to remove this RNA primer, because see, this is RNA. Suppose if I say that the sequence over here is A, that means the sequence over here is U, but U is present in RNA, you are forming DNA, so you need to remove these primers, correct? And this primer removal is again done by the enzyme DNA polymerase, please remember. Okay, so these are of different types. There is DNA polymerase 1 in prokaryotes, there is DNA polymerase alpha in eukaryotes. You remember DNA polymerase, and what that DNA polymerase is going to do is, it is going to basically remove the primer, okay, RNA primer, and in the place of primer it is going to put the DNA nucleotides. So now you will have these two strands. So now even this strand is intact, this strand is intact, and now you cannot understand, if you see, you cannot identify that this is the lagging strand. I hope so. Is this clear? This is your DNA replication part. So all the enzymes, I hope they are clear. Now one part which I wanted to tell you was that when we come to this initial part, this part which is coiled, okay, so when these two strands are uncoiling, what happens is, the uncoiling is happening up to this area, origin area, correct? So what happens is, there is a lot of stress which is created in this. So this entire area which is not uncoiled, it is having a lot of stress because the two strands below are separating, so stress is going upwards, and because of the stress what happens is there are supercoils which are formed. So what is a supercoil? So normally if the two strands are simply coiled like this, then in case of supercoils what is going to happen is multiples more coils will be formed. So there is more coiling than required, and because of that what happens is the DNA can break. Okay, so this stress causes supercoils to form over here. So I'm going to write down the word supercoils, and this stress is removed by an enzyme which is called as DNA gyrase. Okay, so let me use the yellow color. DNA gyrase is also called as DNA topoisomerase, and it is also called as the supercoil relaxing enzyme. Same thing, supercoil relaxing enzyme, DNA gyrase, topoisomerase, same thing. So they remove stress by, how do they remove stress? So they cut one end, they open up the coil, they again attach the two ends. So that is how they work. Okay, one more thing DNA gyrase does is, when these two strands are formed, okay, again you need to coil them up. The coiling of both the strands is also done by DNA gyrase. So DNA gyrase is having two functions. First is it is removing stress from this area which is uncoiled by cutting, producing a cut. Okay, so they will put a cut somewhere over here, they will open up the coil, again they will join it. So that is done by gyrase, and the new daughter DNA molecule which is formed, you need to again coil it, even that coiling is done by DNA gyrase. So two functions are given. Okay, in the state board book they have used the word super helix or supercoil relaxing enzyme, something like that. Supercoil relaxing enzyme is the same as DNA gyrase or topoisomerase. Is this clear? Okay, so this is your part of DNA replication. We have seen all the enzymes, all the parts. Okay, and the next part in our revision is going to be the Michelson and Stahl experiment. Please let me know if you need a revision on that, or I will directly skip to the genetic code part, transcription translation in one lecture. Okay, and then lac operon, and I think that's enough for the revision part. So please let me know. If you want it, I'll put Michelson and Stahl in the next video. It's a very easy experiment. So our revision lecture for today ends. So we have covered the three experiments for DNA as genetic material, correct? We have covered up DNA replication. I hope this is clear. Okay, so that's it from me for this lecture. If you have any doubts, please let me know. Okay, thank you.